Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Daily Defender. So glad you guys are with us. Thank you for spending some time, your time with us. We're very glad to be with you guys again, getting out another video. A very warm welcome to all of our current subscribers and continuous viewers. If this is the first time you're coming to the channel, then a very warm welcome to you as well. Please, if you like the content, hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please continue to subscribe. And I love the comments, as you all know. So please keep those coming. Today I want to talk about a firearm that was kind of on my short list for a while. Wasn't exactly sure how and when I was going to come across one. But this one is, and getting back into, two other of my favorite subjects, Smith & Wesson and revolvers. And so this particular firearm, like I said, that's been on my list for a little while, is technically a .38 M&P, or military and police. But there's also some secondary and tertiary descriptions that tend to be used. The first one is post-war, being World War II. And also, a lot of times you'll hear pre-Model 10, because effectively this firearm becomes a Model 10 in 1957. As we've talked about on this channel kind of many times, Smith & Wesson used names to describe their firearms, whether it's a Chief Special or an M&P or .38 M&P or whatever that is. But in 1957, they went to model numbers. And so again, this becomes a Model 10 in 1957. Actually, the term M&P, or military and police, goes very far back in the Smith & Wesson lineage. I think it's 1899 or something like that. I'll look that up specifically. But it's a term that they've used for a long time, and of course still used today, right, in all of their M&P series firearms. But this one's really kind of cool. I've pegged it. Like I said, these were made, these post-war were made from about 1956 to 1957, again, when it becomes a Model 10. And this one is probably pegged around a 47 to maybe 50, 51. I didn't do an enormous amount of research. I don't have a letter on this gun, but I can kind of peg it in that 47 to 51 range. Because of some features, and we'll talk about that. And the gun really does have some really interesting kind of nuances and features to it, and some really interesting wear, which I want to talk about. And it's it's not a turn of the century gun, but this is not a newer firearm either, right? We're really talking about kind of almost a World War II, or just that, a post World War II, Korea War kind of timeline if you're a history nut. But let's go. Let's get into the deep dive on this .38 military and police. So as I just introduced, we want to take a deep dive on this Smith & Wesson .38 M&P. Post-war, pre-Model 10, a lot of different terminology there, as I mentioned. And just to kind of cover off that historical side again, just because I like to keep the history alive and Smith & Wesson history, and keep kind of, passing that along. I was correct in the intro that in 1899, Smith & Wesson did use the M&P, or military and police, term for the first time. And of course, as we know, it's still used today in current firearms. So it's an intrinsic part of Smith & Wesson terminology and who they are, kind of in their fabric. And so, yeah, that this M&P term or name is used through the first part of the turn of the century. I believe this model then becomes a victory model, and I don't know the exact beginning and end dates of that. I think that's kind of when World War II starts. And then, as I mentioned, this becomes the post-war, pre-Model 10, basically from 1941 to 57, because as we've talked on the channel, and I mentioned in the intro, in 1957, Smith & Wesson starts using model numbers. So they generally still hold on to the names, but the firearms were called, Chief Special or military and police, that kind of thing. But the model number then really becomes the designating factor. And I can't remember how many of these were made. There were millions and millions of basically what became the Model 10. And in fact, I have a Model 10. This is a 10-3. This is a clear and safe firearm, but this is kind of also a K-frame, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see the ramp design. This might look a little bit more familiar to folks. A 2-inch snub, 10-3, .38 Special. Some really actually nice, almost vintage Pacmar grips were on this firearm when I got it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with these, but I actually kind of really warmed up to them, and I think they they do give a little bit of a vintage feel to it as well. But anyways, that's what this would have evolved to. It would have gotten to a Model 10. And I pegged this one, like I said, this would have gone from 46 to 57. And I pegged this one at somewhere between 41 and, I'm sorry, 47 and about 51. And I say that for a couple of reasons. I know that the round butt, which we have here, this is a K-frame, all steel gun. Round butt was introduced in about 47. This is a C serial number gun. They started using the C prefix in about 48. And also the front sight, which I'll talk about in the deep, as we kind of do the walk around. They went to the ramp that you just saw in the 10-3 around 52 or so. So I have to figure this gun is somewhere between 47 and 51. And this is exactly what was kind of on my short list. I wanted a pre-model 10 in the 50s for part of the collection, but also because I'm a bit of a history nut and I kind of love the whole Clint Hill Secret Service JFK assassination and his story and his books. Very, very cool. Great books to read. Great reads. But he was, my understanding is he was issued a Colt 38 special in that time frame in the 50s, and it would have looked very similar to this. I'm not a Colt guy. I'm a Smith guy, so I really wanted something like that from the 50s that kind of had that, kind of harked back to this design, and so that really hit the mark for me. Thankfully, the budget also, I had seen several of these guns well over the $1,000 mark. This one was thankfully a good decent below that, probably because of the wear, but I'm going to talk about that too, because it was actually one of the things that actually appealed to me on this gun. So let's just kind of do our normal deep dive. This is a clear and safe firearm. So let's see, what do we have here? We've got a K-frame, all steel gun, all steel components, right? None of the MIM parts down the road. We've got a 2-inch barrel pinned. You guys know that it's the pin barrel is designation of a certain era for Smith & Wesson. Stamped on this side is Smith & Wesson. It's using the old and symbol, and then the cartridge is 38 Smith & Wesson Special CTG. And I don't know if that really, I guess that kind of focuses there. And CTG is for cartridge. So good information there. Always nice to know your cartridge for your firearm. The ejector rod does have a stop here, if you will. I can't remember the exact term of that. I apologize. But it does have a traditional thumb release or cylinder release, not a flat latch or anything like that. So kind of interesting, being probably an early 50s gun, utilizing that latch. Kind of just walking around it, and I'll come back to the stocks in a minute. But if we kind of flip it over, we've got a beautiful large Smith & Wesson trademark stamp, and then the traditional 4-line information here down at the right side. Your keen eyes may have picked up that this is going to be a 5 screw gun, right? 4 there on the side plate, and then 1 here in the frame. This also kind of harks back to its age, a hand ejector and all of that. As the guns evolved, Smith went from 5 screws to 4 to the traditional 3 that we have today. And that's kind of all that's on this particular side. Just talk about the sights before I come back to the stock. The sight was one of the things that intrigued me about this gun. I believe it's called the 1/10 sight, or I think some people even called it the half nickel sight, just because of its size. It's interesting. It's pretty large here from the this angle or this side, but when you turn it and get a sight picture, it's amazing how quickly it becomes small and thin. And I have to admit, my older eyes had a little bit of struggle with that, but it shot great. I'll come back to that. And no problem putting rounds on target, at 7, 8, 9, 10 yards. Not an issue at all. So part of the appeal to this. And it does have a hammer nose still, of course, at this design age. And again, all metal components. So the stocks are actually a hand ejector style stock, right? You can see the difference here. This doesn't have kind of the swoop up of the Magna stock. This is this is the older hand ejector from the stocks from the late 1800s, 1900s, all the way through here. Diamond pattern. Part of the wear thing that I wanted to talk about, and we'll come back to this side, but the wear in this gun in general was really kind of appealing to me. And most of the time when I'm collecting things, I like them to be in fairly good condition. This one just kind of talked to me, and I think it talked to me because of where I saw the wear. You can see kind of the holster wear here, high points. There's no real pitting or rusting, but just a lot of wear through here on the frame, specifically on this right side. And you can maybe see that in the light, kind of picking up that silver line there on the high point. Same on the trigger guard, more holster wear up front. And then when you get to the right side stock, this is where it really kind of got interesting for me, or just appealed to me. You can see it's almost, or it is worn smooth in some areas. You're starting to lose the diamond. This line is gone. Very, very rounded here, or even more rounded than normal. You've got kind of a patina effect here on the back strap. There's no way to tell. There's no letter or anything like that, but you have to kind of think that, in that era, in the late 40s, 50s, World War II, post-World War II, that, a lot of GIs coming back and doing all kinds of jobs, but, a lot of them probably getting into law enforcement. And just the holster wear alone, and again, most carry guns at that point would have been law enforcement. Certainly you had some civilians, but nothing like today. And also the fact that the lockup was very tight. The mechanics were completely sound on this gun. And in fact, the trigger wasn't as smooth as some of my other K-frame revolvers. And I have to almost then again wonder, did this fall into the carried a lot, shot a little, law enforcement kind of, scope for the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s? That was kind of the thing with law enforcement, right? They really didn't do a lot of shooting. They carried a lot. So the whole thing kind of appealed to me. The price point, the era, the wear, and then it shot great. I was hoping it would shoot like any other K-frame, and it did. Standard 30, current day 38 special ammunition. Of course, no plus P on these guns back in the day. Or do you want to be doing that? That's not the purpose of this gun, right? For me, I'm not looking at it from a defensive standpoint, more of a target shooting, collecting gun. These guns would have been issued with the gold box, if you're kind of familiar with the different boxes that Smith & Wesson used over the decades. It did not come with a box, and probably finding one is going to be a challenge and expensive, especially with the 2-inch round butt. I don't know how many square and round butts were made. I'm very glad this is a round butt. Again, for me, it again harks back to that kind of whole detective thing. No paperwork either, but again, there was no box. But my point is that Smith & Wesson didn't start issuing paperwork with their firearms until 1957, when they started issuing model numbers. So there won't be any paperwork with this particular gun. But I really think that's really what I wanted to share with you guys today. Get kind of a good, solid, older 2-inch snub nose K-frame 6-shot revolver out to you guys. I think it's really cool, shot great. If you're thinking about collecting one, or come across one, or own one, of course, I'd love to hear the comments. But just again, another great Smith & Wesson revolver. So thanks for spending some time with us, and we'll see you again on the Daily Defender very, very soon.